est mort le...
A Clockwork Orange. It was made into a film, and I don't think the film was very well understood. It was seen by most people as a celebration of violence. But the work, in fact, was a piece of orthodox theology. What I presented in the book was this: a young man full of energy, vigor, and intelligence, who deliberately uses free will to choose evil, and evil, of course, is violence in our age. It's destruction for its own sake, the impairing of other living organisms for the sheer joy of seeing them destroyed. But my young hero makes a free choice. The state, the great enemy, takes him over and turns him into a machine, a thing that looks like a living organism, a fruit like an orange, for example, full of juice, full of life, and colour and odour, but is in fact a mechanical thing. And nobody quite understood what I was trying to say. I was trying to say it was far better for a human being to make a free choice of evil, rather than to be forced by the state or any other organization to become a creature incapable of choice. But all people saw, as I say, was the pornography of violence. Unfortunately, I have become, to many people, a kind of godfather of violence. Whenever there's some new violent act reported in the press, it's often my fault, because the perpetrators of this act have seen the film A Clockwork Orange and have imitated it. But I would say no, art comes after reality. You begin with violence, and then you present violence in art. Art doesn't make violence. On the other hand, I can't feel so horrified about violence as many people are. The church and the state have in the past both used violence, both used the powers of destruction to secure conformity, and this still goes on. But now we're having violence in the private sector. Here in Italy we have the Brigate Rosse, the Red Brigades, which use violence because violence is a means of changing. There is the voice of the church, that eternal bell, telling us that there is no private sector. But the private sector exists, and out of the private sector, where violence operates, I think the future is going to be born. Neither the church nor the state is terribly interested in the future. They want the future to be rather like the past, things to continue as they always have. But the writer, the free individual, using his imagination, can foretell, I think, what the future is going to be like. This is very much my concern. In A Clockwork Orange, there was obviously an future, but what I was really concerned with showing was the free operation of violence. Violence is rather an attractive thing, a rather elegant thing, and out of this violence, the possibility of there being born a new world. And I think that when we complain about the violence we see around us today, we're really complaining about the birth pangs of the future. There's a very important character. It's not a person, it is the art of music. And very few people seem to have noticed that the most terrible thing that happens in that book and in the film is that a particular divine vision is denied to an ordinary person. My young voyou, my young thug Alex, associates the hearing of music with violence. He likes violence, he likes music, the two go together, but this isn't essential. Music isn't violent or anything else, music is just music. When the state takes him over and brainwashes him, it puts him in a curious situation. Because he's associated violence with music, whenever he hears music, he rejects it because he's been taught to reject violence. He's sick. He literally wants to vomit when he hears Mozart or Beethoven or Wagner. This is a terrible crime. The state has closed the doors of paradise because of the sense in which music is the paradisal vision. It's nothing to do with morality. We used to believe in the old days that music, especially the music of Beethoven, led us to a vision of a moral God, a God who was good, beneficent. And we believed that the hearing of music also was a kind of moral education. But of course it was not true. We learnt during the Nazi regime that Nazi camp commandants could torture Jews or send them to the torture chambers. And then go home and hear Beethoven or Schubert or Mozart and enjoy it thoroughly. So it's nothing to do with morality. What music probably is a force, a power, which can be used by evil and can be used by good, but is in itself totally neutral. I believe, myself, that if there is a God, this God isn't defined in terms of goodness or truth, but in terms of beauty. I have a vision of God, an auditory vision, I think through my ears, not through my eyes, of God as a kind of ultimate Beethoven's Ninth Symphony, lasting forever, playing beautifully, but playing only for its own enjoyment. So when I hear this theme, it means nothing but what it is. Part of filmmaking. I remember young Malcolm McDowell in the film A Clockwork Orange being killed, or very nearly killed, 3 times. Once because he had a snake and was terrified of snakes. Another occasion when an actor stamped on his ribs and broke them, and yet the scene continued. And the other occasion was when he was dipped into a tank of water and kept down there for 4 minutes. Directors don't mind, they don't care. Humanity becomes a mere commodity, and actors, writers, cameramen are just mere ciphers in a terribly inhuman process. I, as a writer, prefer to be on my own. I don't want stupid people changing my lines. I don't want this business of cooperation with intelligence at its lowest common denominator. I want to be on my own. I prefer to keep my cinema enclosed within the covers of a book. It was to do a very bizarre thing. I had to create a prehistoric language for a French film called Quest for Fire, which apparently is quite popular. And this is one of the most bizarre jobs I've ever had to do. Naturally, the producer and the director thought that there was historical evidence of what language was like in the Stone Age, but of course there is no evidence at all, and one had to start from scratch. You can create a language, you build up a grammar, you create a vocabulary, but of course you've always got to remember you're dealing with the stupidity of actors who are not trained philologists and have to be given the simplest thing possible. So you end up with a language of about 20 or 30 words, and by moving these words around like chessmen, you can create the semblance of a language. You're dealing always in film with raw material which is not highly intelligent. Intelligence is not a great property of the cinema, as you know, but intelligence has to be a property of the novelist, and this is where the conflict begins. I hope never to be engaged in film again, ever, and I hope never to see this damn place, Cinecittà, ever again. Themes. For instance, Beethoven begins like this. What I did in the novel was to have Napoleon brooding in a great bedroom in the Kremlin in Moscow just before the retreat from that city, the beginning of the downfall of his career. So he hears these nonsensical words relating to his downfall and death. There he lies, insanguinated tyrant, oh, bloody, bloody tyrant. See how the sin within doth incarnadine his skin from the shin to the chin, which makes no sense at all. But there is another theme that Beethoven brings in that makes a great deal of sense in the sleeping mind, is this. Napoleon associates that little theme in his dream with these words, O Deutschland, arise, light is dawning in the Deutschland skies, which again is partly nonsense, but he does realize that all he's done with his great conquests is to arouse the German nationalist spirit, and what he's going to do is to bring about the 20th century with Germany's bid for dominance. In the last movement of Beethoven's symphony, we have a theme, just those 4 notes on which everything is based, and in the 4th movement of my novel, I have Napoleon, of course, on St. Helena. He's in exile, he's been defeated. He's been removed from the scene of history. He believes now that he's going to be a new, vital, almost religious force, rather like Jesus Christ himself. And it's appropriate because on St. Helena, there is an association with a great British saint who discovered the whereabouts of Christ's cross. So when we hear this theme, it's as well to associate it with a cruciform structure, the four corners of the cross. We can add these four letters, these four initials, I-N-R-I, which of course stands for Jesus Nazarenus Rex Judaeorum, but also for Rex Imperatorum Napoleonem Interveciamus. Let us kill the King Emperor Napoleon. So the entire movement is based on this structure in the novel as well as in the symphony. And I kill Napoleon in this movement for the second time, but this time in reality, not in dream, because of course he is St. Helena. But as Beethoven ends his symphony with a great roar of the chord of E flat, so my novel has to end in the same way. So Napoleon, who is dead, buried, suddenly springs back to life again on horseback, conducting some great new battle for the salvation of the whole world. This is just one possibility. Music and literature can produce a new form, and in the few years of life I have left, I must work on it. Work Orange has been universally translated because of the film. People want to read the book having seen the film, but for the most part this is not well done because it depends on language trickery, which only a very accomplished translator can hope to deal with. And in consequence, I am not known, as I know myself, I'm known in various countries by certain books which are not typical of me because they're not very complex, not very difficult. It worries me a great deal. Well, the choices that are usually made in other countries